This is the meeting of the Landmarks and Historic Districts Board for January 17th, 2023. It is being conducted both in person and virtually via Zoom. That is pursuant to both New York State and town laws for public meetings. If anyone wishes to comment via the Zoom application, they may do so by going to the town clerk's portal and punching the live button on the town clerk's web page portal, and then either raise your hand or chat comment as to your desire to make some remarks pertaining to the Landmarks business. We have in attendance today, we have Member Khan, Member Ganez, Member Clark, Member Gibbons, Member Roberts, Member Hine, Member Davis, Member Green, and Member Wisnowski present. There are no minutes of the previous meeting subject for approval, so that will be passed over. And we can proceed to the agenda as it was published. And it begins with first the demolition applications to the building department, subject to Landmarks review. And the first one is 2 Squires Avenue in East Quogue. And I believe Stephanie and Bill have their fingerprints on this.
Yes. Thank you very much, Ed. First demolition, or the only demolition application before us tonight, is for 2 Squires Avenue in East Quogue. This is a property in the Pine Neck area of East Quogue at the east end of Squires Avenue and adjoining Tiana Bay. What is proposed to happen here is demolition of a dwelling, a former boarding house, 2 sheds, and a garage. Demolition of one shed was actually previously demolished. I had an occasion to visit the property on 2 days, one day just on the exterior, and the other I had access to the interior of the buildings as well. The property was outlined in the Hamlet Heritage Area report for East Quogue. Both the dwelling and the boarding house, which are shown in the historic postcard on the screen there, were reported to have been constructed in 1890, which jives with the history of the family. They were constructed by a John William Caffrey, who was originally from New York and a member of the U.S. life-saving crew in the Shinnecock Station, and also his wife, Emmeline Squires. And the 2 of them married in 1878. Emmeline was from Hampton Bays and the daughter of Benjamin Franklin Squires of Hampton Bays, formerly known as Good Ground, who founded the Pine Grove Boarding House in 1863. The Pine Grove Boarding House is located a short distance to the south, further out on Pine Neck. This boarding house continued in operation by Emmeline and John, primarily by Emmeline, it seems. And then after her death in 1946, it was operated by her daughter, Minerva Sinclair Caffrey, until her death in 1975, after which it was sold, and I understand was operated until fairly recently also as a boarding house. The picture just out of the view on the top of your screen there, Ed, shows the boarding house, or the main dwelling as it appeared in about 2013, when it was still lived in, and as I understand, rooms were still rented out. I've included a number of photographs in the report showing the current condition of the property. These buildings are boarded up primarily to prevent vandalism, or at least further vandalism, primarily to protect the windows, to protect against entry, et cetera. But the buildings have been, it appears, entered in the past on a number of occasions. There's indications of various kinds of vandalism that went on inside. The buildings are remarkably, I'm not going to say preserved, but they're remarkably intact in terms of their interior features. You can see downstairs in the common areas, there's a lot of wood paneling that's still in fairly good shape. There are areas definitely of water intrusion, as can be seen by the photograph below there. You can scroll it up a little bit. That's an area of the ceiling and a wall that have given way from water intrusion. This was in the dwelling. There's areas of the roof with holes. There's areas of the walls with holes in them to the outside, evidence of animal intrusion. This is an example of one of the bedrooms in the main house. A number of these rooms seem to have been subdivided at some point in their past to make more rooms to be rented out. The rooms are very, very small. With a few exceptions, the bathrooms are down the hall. There were a few rooms with sinks in them. There's a lot of original furniture, apparently original furniture left in the house. There was actually a grand size player piano in one room, numerous dressers, a bunch of audio equipment, just a lot of stuff left where it was from days of yore.
I notice in one of the pictures here by the stairway, empty frames.
Yes.
They look like rather elegant frames.
There was, I mean, there's a lot of evidence of, formerly elegant conditions in at least portions. This is a picture taken in the boarding house proper, which seems to have had an overall better quality of ambiance inside than the dwelling that eventually became used as a boarding house as well. A lot of more detailed woodwork. The woodwork in the house was somewhat more simple, but the windows are original. Basically, nothing seems to have been touched here for the most part since it was built in 1890. There was a more modern kitchen in the backside of the dwelling that's been largely gutted. That's the picture that shows the roof with a big tarp over it. There is a barn on the property, the main volume of which appears to be original to the construction. The owner intends to keep the barn. There's a shed you can see on the right-hand side there that's on the back side of the barn. That's the side that faces the street, is the back side. And then there's also a shed addition on the left-hand side, which faces the neighboring property. The interior of the barn, portions of the floors are wood, but the remainder of the floor is earthen. I didn't see anything other than fully dimensional lumber in there, no timber frame or anything like that. There's definitely some deflections in the floors, suggestive of settlement, et cetera, but I didn't see any major problems with the barn, and it's nice that is being kept. There's a picture of a shed on the north side of the property that the owner intends to retain. I couldn't get access to the interior. I did look through the windows. There didn't seem to be anything of particular importance inside the shed, but it also looks to be an original dwelling or original building on the property. And then finally, on the next page, there's a picture of what was most likely an outhouse. It has two doors. I didn't see any evidence of the former seating arrangements in there, but there were some shelves built in, and they seem to have used it for various storage of various materials at this point in time. So, I mean, overall, the property retains a lot of historic fabric, some of which seems to be in decent condition, but there is overall a fair amount of neglect, water intrusion, animal intrusion, and absolutely nothing, as far as I could see, has been updated since its original construction, with perhaps a few exceptions in the kitchen area. So if this property were not quite as deteriorated as it is, it might meet criteria, or at least one criteria for consideration as a landmark. But I'm concerned that its current condition makes it to the point of beyond being reasonably salvageable.
Another Brewster house.
Yeah, although not quite as far gone as Brewster, perhaps, but headed that way. And the foundation, by the way, is brick on the perimeter. I couldn't tell how far down it goes. I did get a couple of glimpses of the underlying material through holes in the floor. It's a very short distance from the frame to the soil. I don't know if it's supported, what its supporting mechanism is underneath, whether there are brick piers or wood posts or boulders or what. There is one exterior cellar door underneath a portion of the dwelling. That door could not be opened. It was padlocked, and the gentleman who assisted me did not have the key. So there may be some cellar arrangement under a portion of the dwelling, but the other portions of the dwelling that I could see through the floor, there was no foundation other than the perimeter that I could see.
Was this a recently sold property?
I don't know what the timing is on its being sold. We did review a property right down the street on Willow Shade. I'm going to say probably 5 or 6 years ago. That was a property for which some construction was proposed. And I remember at the time, I was curious because there's this house and then there's the 4 Squires Avenue house that was Fred Squire's original house right down the street. So I tried to get a peek at that time. And the thing that struck me about this property at the time was it appeared to be neglected then. And, there was various junk strewn around the yard, and I decided it didn't look like something I should go visit on my own. I would guess that the property transfer has occurred since that time.
So the question really is there anything that we can recommend in a positive manner with respect to this? It's certainly not landmarkable as its current character, so
Yeah.
Somebody would have to invest tons of money for a house and a building that might not have great use in a modern context.
Yeah, I don't know what, there's plans to put a replacement residence on here. The new residence is gonna be set back from the water a bit, which this is a very open bayfront location. It's got a fair amount of elevation on it. I think the elevation is something on the order of 17 feet. It comes right up from the bay. But it's definitely exposed to, storms, et cetera. You can see the weathering of the shingles on the sides of the house that face the bay is considerably more than the weathering on the other side. So certainly having a residence that's set further back from the water is advisable. I think that there are some interior materials that could be salvaged. Not all of the windows are broken yet, and they are beautiful 2/2 windows. There is a lot of woodwork on portions of the interior that might be salvageable in areas that haven't suffered from water intrusion. So I think, recommending salvage and reuse of materials as applicable or as feasible would be prudent.
Any comments from our colleagues here? But basically, there's no reason to object to it except perhaps call attention to the process of deterioration over a period of time as a problem that we confront with our historic resources in town. Just to put it on the record as one of those instances.
Yep. That's definitely, I think, the case. If this property had been, perhaps 10 years ago, if we'd been having this conversation, the recommendation might be, very different.
Do you know how long the current owners had that?
I don't know. I don't know when the last property transfer occurred.
But there's, it's no indication they're the same people that owned it for the last 10 years.
I don't think so.
Okay.
Now, given the nature of the house that's being constructed there, I think the architect is from New York City. I think it's a different owner than the previous owners.
When you Google it, it says it was sold on December 2021 for $2,800,000. So I assume that's the same owner.
Yeah, it would be the current
So they've had it
owner
for a
now.
couple of years.
Yeah. Oh, great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now we know where to go if we need real estate information.
We could get a phone out.
You just Google the address.
Yeah,
It's not always correct, but
So,
but at least this gives us
our
an...
response will be no objection, but calling attention to the problem of neglect of historic resources that might need a solution somehow,
Yes.
and retrieval of potentially architecturally useful materials from the boarding house, and
Yep. I will take care of that.
okay. And thankfully, only one demolition application on the agenda for this evening, so. The construction application for 3 East Pond Lane, Eastport. And we have here, let's see, there's that.
Okay, so this is an application that deals with converting a circa 1960 detached garage into an apartment. No work is planned for the main dwelling, which is historic, or the other 2 accessory buildings, which do not appear historic. The accessory structure is behind the main dwelling as you view it from Montauk Highway, but it does front on East Pond Lane. It's sort of a through lot. It is briefly visible from Montauk Highway. You can just see it behind the house in that photo. The house is noted on the AKRF as EP10. It has an AYB in the mass appraisal information of 1890, but the AKRF noted it as being built in 1860. At that time, it was potentially landmark eligible under town criteria A and C back in 2014. It's also listed in the Eastport Hamlet Heritage Area Report. Both of the studies note it as the Captain William Tuttle House. I've included photographs from 2007, 2014, 2017, and again in 2023, which show the changes of the house in the last 5 or 6 years. It was white and then blue asbestos siding, and then it got changed to vinyl siding. It was a black or dark gray asphalt roof. Now it's a brown asphalt roof. The windows, you'll notice the drawing as the photos change, were originally 2/2. Then a lot of the first floor windows were changed to 1/1, and then all of the windows except for the gable end window up there on the in the attic were all changed to 6/1. No work is scheduled for the main dwelling. We've reviewed this property 3 times since 2017. Originally in 2017, they wanted to do solar panels on the house, and they were not located in these locations, and we did not object to them at that time. They didn't do the work. In 2020, they came back to us with another application to do solar panels, and all of the second floor roof, except for one small portion, is now covered with the solar panels. Highly visible from Montauk Highway, highly visible from East Pond Lane in the back. The entire second floor is covered with them. They also returned with an application in 2022 to landmark the house. Stephanie met with them at that time. She and I discussed the house with the windows having been changed, with the vinyl siding, and particularly with the solar panels. We were both in agreement that at this time, we couldn't see it being landmarked. All of the structures on the property have a matching vinyl siding. They all have asphalt roofs. The subject detached garage has an AYB of 1960. There's also a shed which has an AYB of 1960. There's no work on that. There's a second one-car garage, again with an AYB of 1960. No work is going to be done on that. As I inspected the building, the dimensional lumber inside, the walls, the roof, and the floor, which is sort of odd for a garage that it has a wood-framed floor. It seems that the floor was probably a little shaky, and at one point they did a beam down the middle of it. There you go. Haphazardly made out of odd pieces of wood and wooden posts, which I think was to take some of the deflection out of the floor. Even as such, I don't think I would pull my car into that garage. A wood-framed floor with plywood, and oddly again, it has a wood tongue and groove floor for the garage floor with a hatch in it. Again, I'm not sure I'd want to park my car on that. In order to get the garage door in, they notched the ceiling joists so that the door could pass sort of curving under them. And where the arrow is in this photo, you can see where the wall doesn't meet the ceiling so that the garage door can open above the wall. The garage door is very commercial looking. It's not very residential. It's facing the street. There's a lot in that photo. You can see a lot of secondary hangers and strapping that I think they were just doing, whatever they had with odd pieces of material to try and hold it together. The strongest thing in there is the steel I-beam over the door, which was also a surprise.
This suggests that the construction was never inspected by a building inspector
Yes.
because there was never a building permit.
Yeah, and I can't imagine that there was an architect who drew it either. So again, the wood flooring is sort of odd. The wood floor framing is kind of odd. The fact that it has a basement underneath it, it is CO'd.
unusual.
It's called out on the survey as a garage. It's CO'd as a garage. The original application from 1958 is in the GIS. Again, it was called a garage, but either cars were much lighter, which I don't think so in 1958.
No, God,
Or
no.
Probably
The
more
TT
heavier.
Yeah.
muscle cars, no way.
Yeah, those big fins, the late 50s.
Yes, yeah.
Those Cadillacs.
It has mismatched windows. Two of the windows have sash weights and wavy glass. One of them has spring sash cords covered in plastic. That one's in really bad shape. It appears like these windows came from somewhere else and were put in the building, sort of salvaged from somewhere and then repurposed here, because the windows are much older than the wood framing. There's 3 walls, and instead of sheetrocking them or plywooding them, they used reclaimed wood flooring to cover the wall. I guess it was sort of an artistic kind of a thing. It was rather odd as well. The main dwelling is from 1890, but as I say, no work is being done on that. That has also been significantly modified with additions. The windows have been changed from the 2/2 to 6/1. The siding having been replaced with the vinyl siding. And at this point, the solar panels have now been added to the entire second floor roof. So there's no historic fabric on the outside of the house. Currently, we don't feel that it's feasible to landmark that building. And I didn't think that we should object to converting this to an apartment.
Is there already water in there?
You could see, there was a shower
Oh, okay.
and plumbing for a toilet and a sink. No toilet and a sink there, but the shower stall, one-piece shower stall was there. So you can see the water to the left and, again, sort of,
The electrical and
yeah, possibly done by a homeowner or something.
plumbing finesse is missing.
Yeah, all of it was, pretty shaky, so, yeah.
So your recommendation is,
To not object to converting this structure to an apartment. I think the.
not objecting to the new possible use,
Correct.
but perhaps objecting to the state of construction and,
Well, definitely when you look at the drawings, they're gonna do a lot of work to that building
yeah.
to bring it up to code.
Well, I think that's the good news.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's
Right,
not
that's the
safe.
positive thing, is
is.
that
The-
clearly this was done, this
There's a
structure was
safety
probably
hazard.
used
Right.
as some kind of living situation
Yeah.
for somebody illegally.
Yes.
And now they'll bring it up to code, and I think that's a positive thing.
Correct, yeah. And I think the loss of the somewhat commercial-looking garage door, replacing it with more residential door and window configurations,
Right.
helps out.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Okay, so no objection, and is that everybody's spirit here? Okay. Okay, 27 Lockwood, Bridgehampton, which has been a place we have been before. February 2021. Let's see, do I have? This is a stucco cottage, built 1932. Was in the AKRF survey as a potential historic resource, as a slightly Tudor aura for it.
Charming little house. Nice.
They actually first appeared here in 2017 because they were going to do, I think, an interior renovation and poke through and make a cathedral type space inside this house. And I don't think they went through with the complete plan, but they came back in 2021 with an expanded set of operations. This is the second story that they have put on the house. The second story was basically to connect two dormers that were independent on this side of the house and to kind of add room. So it became a big shed, continuous shed dormer on the southern side. That was in the plan we reviewed and did not object to in 2021. As I said, the AYB is 1932, and clearly the newspaper account of the house being built for Charles Thiel at the time, just shortly after his marriage to Ellen Marin. They built the cottage and lived in it for many years, and after they died, the children had it and for many years, and then sold it, and has been in the process now of being slowly renovated by its current owners. I found that basically the plan that they had in mind was to, if I can get the application up here, and the application says they plan to expand the rear of the house for a kitchen and second floor bedroom, was being abandoned, and instead they were just going to put a patio on the rear of the house, which would not be visible, and so would not disturb the existing area. This is the house. This is the front of the house that you saw. This is the side that we saw with the shed dormer right here, and this was the area that they were going to expand out for both expanded first floor kitchen and a second floor bedroom area, but they decided to abandon the plan and just have a porch on the rear of the house. So I find there's nothing to object to myself. It's diminishing the change that they had originally proposed. The house's character, as it's being altered, will, carry forward, but there would be no other major change to it. So comments from people that I have, if I have the plan here, maybe it will show up. Yes, this is the plan area, the rear of the house that is the subject of this revised construction application that they made. And this is the portion that is not being built up. No comments, anybody? If not, I will make a no objection to it response, and we can do away with that. 500 Flying Point Road. And
Pull that up. Just an interesting property. To clarify, there's no construction being done on the main house. It's the two-story accessory structure, which has a two-car garage and an apartment above in this, I think the CO was referred to as a caretaker's cottage. Those pictures were taken, the second set, well, all of them were taken from the road. I didn't go on the property. I actually, this was on the Southampton History Museum's Insider Tour in 2015 and in 2022. And I went on the 2015, and I think since then it had been purchased, redecorated, and the newer owner offered it last year. But it's a beautiful property, and I really didn't know too much about it. So what I found was interesting. Basically, this area of a watermill on the Flying Point area is synonymous with the Burnett family. However, across the street there was a Sayre family on the maps in 1858 and 1873. And I had talked at one point a number of years ago to Buddy Burnett, and actually one of the Sayres married the Burnett, and so some of the properties, of course, switch family names. So, I didn't include the older maps because it's really not associated, with the Burnett family or for the Sayre family for that matter. It seems, even though the town, tax assessor, the appraisal, they assigned the year 1825, to me it's very clearly not shown on the 1930 aerial, but it is shown in 1938. And the first article I found where there was a reference to the property was in 1932. And at that point, it was, and I believe it's the gentleman who built the property was a single man named Francis Hartman Marco. And he attended Yale and then Oxford, and he put on pageants and musicals, and he seemed to use this property for that. And you can see with the way it was terraced in back how that would have fit into to be a very theatrical when he had his jungle parties and different types of theme parties there. But he frequently entertained, and there are numbers of articles in the New York Times, the Brooklyn Daily Eagle, and the Southampton Press. I included a few that I thought are the more important ones, but he was frequently mentioned. I assume having built it in 1931, of course being the beginning of the Depression, it said that his father was a wealthy New York City a physician, that he must have come into some money that way. His mother's maiden name was Shelton, and I guess looking at that, I am assuming that the name of the property came from the Shelton and the Marco, so the property was named Shelmar, and that's how it's referred to in there's our 38 map where you can see it. And if you go back, go back to the 30, it's clearly not, pretty vague. You back up one right there. It looks like there may have been a road crossing over there, that the Sayres may have had something down near the water at the time, a barn or something, but there was no house at that time. And it was sold in the last few years, and the real estate suggested it was 1928. And I know with the stucco it appears to be that. But that's the main house, and it is a very unique property. It had some interesting owners. Mr. Marco married a widow socialite around 48, and they continued to entertain there into the 60s. There was one point they were entertaining on First Neck and down here, so I guess it was probably her former husband's property and theirs. He sold it in 1940 on page 6. I included the entire article because there was a lot of biographical information about Francis Hartman Marco, that he put on the 300th anniversary musicale and pageant, and incorporated the local people and a lot of New York City talent. And the one interesting person, there was a concert singer, Mary Ledgerwood, and I actually met the woman in my childhood because they boarded with my grandmother for the summer. So we were here for a week. I think we bumped them out of the Blue Room, one of the 2 bedrooms, so for our family. But anyways, they had a house on Post Crossing, but I've seen her name mentioned in a number of things through the years. But obviously with that article, he had a really nice write-up of everything he did. They also mentioned that Abigail Halsey, who wrote the 300th, I think I have a copy of that book from 1940, her history. But he sold it in 1960 to Mr. and Mrs. Richard Humphrey, or Humphreys, shortly before his death in 1960. Mr. Humphreys was a Boston-based, had an ad agency. He owned it, was a CEO. After that, it went to an Italian dancer, Alessandro Fusana, and his wife Nora, followed by the Cohen and Hayflicks, and then the current owners. But that's, the basic of the property. And when it comes to the property, to the actual construction application, I'm not sure if you've got the separate one I sent. But I did call the agent because it appeared that the elevations were reversed. And that's easy enough to do because sometimes the way they're lined up. But that particular property, I think after there were interior renovations, you could tell something was being done there after it was sold the last time, but we received no application for that. But this application is for this particular two-story house. The south elevation, right now the stairs appear to be on the north elevation, and they want them moved over to the south elevation where they're going to be very visible from the road. There are hedges there, but they'll still be seen. There'll be changes in the window placement, and all the windows are going to be replaced, and the garage doors are going to remain in basically the same place. It said the roof was going to remain, however, with the blue tarp, and she said, well, she thought there might have been a leak or something there. Obviously, there's going to be some repair there. Because this is really separated from the main house, and you can see with that current west elevation, it's totally screened from the main house, but visible from the road. And there's another garage, the one-story garage is located on that same, to the right of that, on that same parking lot, that the only place is visible is from the road. And I guess I could find no reason to object. It appears on that, the current south side, there's some different casement, the awning type windows upstairs. The windows, I don't believe, are original. My only recommendation was to see if they could try to keep those stairs maybe on the north side. That would be my so they're not visible from the road, if it's at all possible. But I wouldn't object to it. I would just, I wouldn't recommend that we object, but just make that recommendation. It's, it was considered the caretaker's cottage. It may very well be a guest type place. Residence now, but I'm not sure if anybody else has any feelings on that.
Why did they want to relocate?
Was that-
Why did they want to relocate the
They're
staircase to the other
just,
side?
somebody drew up a new set of plans, and they didn't really give a reason why, but it seemed it would be easy enough that if you could keep them on the north where they are, or even on the west if need be, except there's a lot of screening there, that would be preferable to, no reason given.
So this is the
Yeah,
location of the
Yeah.
building for
right.
the construction
And you
application.
can see right to the right is where the one-story garage, you see another roof over if you go the other direction to the east side, other side. Oh, well, it's on that same parking lots where the one-story garage is, so you'd have to go back to the two-story. The subject one is very close.
And
So that's,
just to,
you look over a little
Give.
bit to the right-hand side of the screen. But no, I didn't, I looked at the interior plans and, they decided to, that's how I knew the elevations were not right, in particular because she said, they said they were gonna move the stairs to the roadside.
so,
And that's the parking area and where the other garage is located.
so, okay, is no objection from anyone on,
Seems an odd thing to do, but okay.
It's like, but you're feeling the same way, Vicky, to keep the stairs on?
Yeah, I would, but I would not object to it.
Right.
I mean, it's so far away from the house, it's not.
Right.
Doesn't,
Do you think
Right,
they can see
exactly.
it from the house? What's their objection?
I think that may be it. They want the view from the house to be
They might be able to see
approved.
it from the house.
Right, and this one, I don't even know if you can see them from the house because of that, with that screening, they really weren't visible from the house.
Maybe from the upper level of the house you can see it.
Was that,
On the upper levels from the
Oh,
house, you'd be
that's-
able to look down from the bedrooms
could-
and see it, so.
okay, I hadn't thought about that, but I would make that suggestion, but still with no objection.
It's gonna ruin
Okay,
the whole
fine.
thing.
What?
It's
Leave it
gonna
at
ruin
that.
the whole thing.
So 151 South Country Road next to 149 South Country Road.
Okay, I'm going to recuse myself and step outside as I am the architect for this project.
Okay.
Okay, I circulated a report concerning the property prior to the meeting. I will also note that Bill provided ample photo documentation of the property before we get started. Just for reference here, wait till we come back. Okay, there are three properties here that are of interest. There's the property where your cursor is right now, which is 151 South Country Road. In a short while, we'll be talking about the property to the immediate right of that, which is 149 South Country Road. A landmarking application has been submitted for that. And the property also to the left of 151, that one right there, is related to the Tuttle family, which is involved in all three of these properties. So I had a chance to go take a look at the interior and the exterior of 151 South Country Road, the subject property, with Bill. Looking at the historic map information, it appears that this dwelling was constructed sometime between 1873 and 1902, and it ties in with the history of the property ownership of essentially all three properties, but primarily 149 South Country Road, the historic house immediately to the south. This house was probably built for a Byron Willis Tuttle, who is the second son of Austin Tuttle. He married Abigail Mary Rogers of Spionk in September 1885, and it's likely that the home on 151 South Country Road is built about that time. There were quite a few references in local newspapers about them living locally in Remsenburg at one time, taking in boarders, etc. After Byron Tuttle's death in 1932, his wife, Abigail, continued to live in the house, likely until her death in 1954. Abigail was blind, and one of the stories my mom always told was the fact that there was this wire between 151 South Country Road and 149, and Abigail would use this to go over to 149 safely between the two houses, because at 149 is where her son Willis Tuttle eventually lived. So there's very interesting Tuttle history associated with this house. What is even more interesting to me was the construction of this house. It has an AYB of 1920, and a lot of the aspects of the house read as 1920 aspects. There is an old brick cellar beneath much of the house, probably the largest brick cellar I've seen, circular. But it shows evidence of more recent changes to it. The one wall has been broken through to add a Bilco door to go outside of the dwelling. There is a perimeter foundation around the edge of the house that is those decorative concrete blocks that are, I think of as generally more recent than the 1885 date of this house. Up in the attic and in portions of the cellar, there are timbers, hand-hewn timbers, some with the bark still on, that look like they were salvaged from an older structure and incorporated into the rafters for the attic, as shown in the picture at the top there, and also incorporated as a portion of the foundation materials in the basement, particularly in the back of the house. And you can see some of these timbers there. You can see there's one being supported by a brick pier, and it just comes out into space and ends where it doesn't support anything. But as you go toward the back of that picture, the timbers are serving a function to support the structure. You can see a number of cut spots and holes in the timbers that don't correspond to any current framing members, so they clearly were salvaged from elsewhere. What was interesting, you've got this mix of older materials and then clearly, I think, more recent materials in terms of the foundation and the interior finishes. If you go immediately next door to 153, the next house to the north, that has an AYB of 1880, and it is more of a Victorian sort of structure. I didn't include any pictures of it in here. It's up, I think, at the end of the report. Yes, there's a picture of it at the end of the report in the historic reference materials that are attached. That house next door at 153 has always been known as the French house because the French family lived in it. And the last reference I have to boarders associated with this house was Mr. French, who came to stay at Mrs. Byron Tuttle's Green Cottage in the 1930s. So whether the structure that's shown there, which is the subject of this application, was really a 1920 structure built on the foundation or the round cellar of an older structure, and the older structure was picked up and moved to the lot to the north, which could be the case. I'm not sure. I have not been able to find any newspaper records of the house move, etc. It's just that when you look at the historic maps, there is no house. 1902, 1916, there is no dwelling shown on the property to the north. It's noted in there as Miss Ira Tuttle, I believe, and it is a vacant property. So I think there's some mysteries associated with the actual origin of the subject house. What's proposed to be done to this house is a very significant amount of renovation. And what I tried to show in the report is side-by-side pictures of the house as it exists now, and then what it's going to look like after the renovation. Yeah, there we go. So as it exists now, there's the original volume, whether it's 1920 or older, on the right-hand side there. There used to be an open porch on the front that was before my lifetime that's been enclosed, and the space actually incorporated into living space inside. But you can see some changes on both the exterior and the interior of the structure that clearly indicates that a porch had been there. In the center and then to the left are a breezeway and a garage that are clearly not part of the original volume, and they're not historic at all. And then there's the two upstairs dormers, which still retain the original 4/1 windows, and they have beautiful wavy glass in them. They're going to retain the dormers, but the windows are all throughout this house going to be replaced with newer windows. They're going to be 6/1 on the bottom, and then the 4/1 on the top. So at least the windows will look like the current windows, but they will be replacement windows. And I will say that there are no storms on these windows. These are single pane glass with no insulation. On the non-historic part of the house, they're going to retain the breezeway, but it's going to be converted from a breezeway to more of a living space. And then the garage is going to also be converted to living space. There's a little cupola been added to the garage. There's this sort of bump out where the driveway is now. There'll be also a little porch on the right-hand side there. The roofs are going to be metal roofs on the newer volumes. Apparently, in discussing this with Bill, the new owner wanted these country touches, old-fashioned touches, even though there's no metal roofs on this structure. Let's see, can we look at the next page? Okay, this shows the north side of the house, which is mostly visible from the road as well. You can see the 6/6 windows, those were added into that original front porch that was enclosed. You can see the original 4/1 windows toward the back and upstairs. Apparently they are gonna keep the little window at the top with its little half-round detail. That will remain. And also that kicked edge between the second story and the first story will remain. The upper portion will remain as shingles, as it is now. The lower portion is going to be clapboard siding. And this is the side where there's that little porch coming out. On the back of the structure, which is at the right there, there's going to be a large extension into the current backyard area. The back side of the house is not at all visible from the street, so you will not see that extension. All right, we can go to the next page, Ed. Okay, this shows the current back of the main volume of the house, the back of the breezeway, and part of the back of the garage. There's the upstairs dormer there, looks really awkward. It originally had a single doghouse dormer, and then they wanted to add bathrooms up there, so they extended them out and put those awful windows in, and the dormer goes almost to the edge of the roof. That dormer is going to be retained. The window situation will be fixed, but it will stay as far out. Bill couldn't talk them out of shrinking it back in to make it a little bit more, to scale. Yeah, this picture shows what the back of the house will look like. You can see the bump out on the left-hand side. There's also going to be a bump out from the back of the garage on the right-hand side. And again, you won't see any of this from the street. And you can see the window arrangement upstairs that looks better than the current. And then there's the other side, the final side. This shows the garage now converted to living space. That's on the right. The addition to the back side of the garage on the left, and the main volume of the house behind it. There will be, you can't see it in here, but there's a similar sort of kicked edge to the side between the second story and the first. That will remain. And there'll be this little square window added to the side of the dormer as well. So for this side, you can see part of the garage from the street, but you won't be able to see most of the additions out the back. So, I think in closing, I'm very glad that the house is remaining in the community, and while it doesn't look particularly historic now from the street, because of the changes that have been made to it in the past, the addition of the garage, the addition of the breezeway, and the enclosure of the front porch, I'm glad that they're keeping at least the style of the windows, even if they're not keeping the original windows. They're keeping the style that exists now. And this historic resource, even though it's been considerably rejiggered in the past, will remain in the community. So, wish they weren't putting the metal roofs on, but.
Well, we've seen that before too, and it's
Quite a few
in
applications.
a mix, of roof applications,
Yes.
It seems to be part of the current taste at the moment.
Yes, and at least they're not putting in black windows.
Yeah, I'm painting it white.
Yeah.
So to me, the house had, its previous additions and renovations, has taken away some of the historic features certainly and the character of it. So now the question was, is this moving in any way towards a retrieval of any of those features? I don't believe it is. So, but I don't see that as a great issue given what the original structure is in its contemporary state.
Yes.
And for me, I have no concern. It's interesting what's in the basement.
Yes. Well, that's,
Uh,
that's one of the things I'd like to recommend, is that they retain as much of those old salvaged features as they can. Most of them appear to be in decent shape. There are one or two spots where there seem to be some deterioration, and the contractor may be inclined to replace those items, so.
So any feelings about this project that you want to express? Okay.
I will-
So there's no objection on that?
No objection.
Would you do the report on that then too as well?
No
Steph?
problem, yep. We should retrieve
I'll
Bill.
tell Bill he can come back
Could
in.
you, Tom? Okay. 59 East Tiana Road, Hampton Bays. I circulated a report last night. This morning, after a couple more hours, got more clues to some of the mystery of that house. Let me first try to get that up. Oh, yeah, yeah. And get out of here. Okay, this is located on the east side of Tiana Bay. Actually, this area used to be called East Tiana Village, I guess because of the number of boarding houses and concentration of individuals associated with them that were located in this area. Let me just also go back here to just show relative to Montauk Highway and the bay that this is Montauk Highway, and then this is East Tiana Road running south. I should disable this, but anyway, this is the oblique picture of this cottage, which has an assessor right here, has an assessor AYB of 1920. This is an addition that by aerial images was constructed someplace between 1962 and 1976. It was not there on the 1962 map. And this sits on a concrete block foundation, as well as some of the other portions of this cottage, but you can see the difference in age from some of the images that I took. It turns out that this area was an area of boarding houses. The 2 or 3 boarding houses that were located on this corner area of East Tiana Road. One was in the 1890s, 1900s. One was the Shinnecock Bay House, owned by John Corwin. Across the street, his brother owned, George Corwin owned the Corwin House, and there were 1 or 2 other houses, boarding houses in the location. And they, just like the one Squires, they lived in a separate house from the boarding houses in this area. In any case, in that report I sent out, I did show show a picture of the house. This house is, needs some attention, so to speak. The proposal is to demolish this one-story section of the house and replace it with a two-story replacement, and retain the one-story more recent construction that I mentioned before to you a few moments ago. The house obviously is not in the Town Historic Resources Survey. This is, again, where the house is located. This is 1916 map, shows it being owned by John Corwin from the Belcher Hyde Atlas. And what I discovered this morning is actually, I had nothing documenting it between basically the 1916 map and the 1975 subdivision map. But this morning I found an article about the will of a Viola Corwin. Turns out that Viola is the daughter of John Corwin, and after John Corwin died in 1923, his wife Nettie and only daughter Viola, she was a school teacher, taught first in Patchogue, where both she and her mother lived, and then taught in Huntington schools, and they moved to Huntington. And you know, the thought occurred to me that maybe they might have used it for a summer cottage. And then I did find out a 1924 article from the historic newspapers. Nettie Corwin and daughter Viola spent their weekend at their bungalow in Tiana. This is after they had moved to Patchogue, so this was the bungalow. The when she
I just wanted to comment, I did see the Viola Corwin name in the discards around 1953, in the GIS.
Okay, I didn't catch the discards.
Well, I just skimmed it before, but I wasn't sure who she was related to until now, but she seemed to be the one, like 53, who sold it to the next family, but Viola was noted around 53.
Well, she didn't sell it, she willed it.
Okay,
She willed it to her cousin, Anna Michoud,
okay,
who was the wife of Howard Michoud, who
Okay.
was who in 1975, it was his estate who subdivided that 2-acre parcel into 3
okay,
properties. So that's how
okay.
the connection got made, and
It didn't say sell, it just had 2, so thank you.
right.
You're
So
good, Ed.
yeah. So basically, Michoud, not the Michoud associated with the Hampton Bays beach. That was Stephen Michoud. This Howard Michoud, he was an insurance businessman, lived on Montauk Highway in Hampton Bays, and he owned it for that period of time of his life at the time the subdivision was made. His notability, besides being a businessman, he was the first postmaster of Hampton Bays, quote unquote, because Hampton Bays changed its name from Good Ground to Hampton Bays, and he became the first person appointed with that as postmaster with that designation. And the only other rather prominent feature of his life was a tragedy in 1940 when his 2 of his 21-year-old children, 2 daughters who were actually daughters of a triplet in the family, died in a sailing accident with 2 more of their cousins, and the last body was retrieved someplace in Flanders 4 weeks later, before they had everything solved. The postmaster's family kind of was famous because not only did they have the 3 triplets, but they had a set of twins, and then 3 other children as well. So they were kind of prominent in the social landscape of newspapers of the time for that until the tragedy occurred. But the house has basically no big historical value to it and is not in any kind of shape as an architecturally distinct structure. And so my recommendation is to not object to that. There is an interesting that's the house. There was an interesting barn that's used as a garage on the back of it. It shows up in the 1938 photograph as well. Nothing is planned, that's planned to be retained. This is the back of the house, which indicates probably there were additions. You can see the difference between the concrete block foundation elements for the structures and the different windows that are in the houses. And that is a closer picture of the garage or barn that's there at the moment. So my recommendation is, not to object to their planned renovations. So any kind of comment? If not, I will so respond on that. Okay. Bridgehampton Historic District discussion. Just briefly, one other thing about, well, I'll mention it later. Bridgehampton Historic District discussion. I recently had an inquiry from the supervisor about making progress, and I reported that I had some meetings with representatives of the Bridgehampton community on the historic district discussion and progression, and indicated that we would begin moving forward with it in the month of February. So we hope to have more to report and
What does
present
that
to you
look like?
in February.
What does that look like when you say move forward?
Pardon?
What does that look like? What shape does moving forward take?
Moving forward looks like presenting a list of the properties that would be included in the proposed district and getting some announcement of it as well. There are a few quirks to work out. One is getting letters, how letters would be sent to owners, property owners. I'm not sure about the full measure of support from land management and their ability to execute on something like that, but lots of little stuff got to be
Okay.
checked into as well.
Excuse me. Ed? So did we settle on just the business?
Just a
area?
bit, yes. The
Okay.
Meeting in December, we had a discussion whether or not it would should go bigger or smaller, and
Going smaller.
the
For the
board
moment.
wanted smaller as the first approach to getting the first historic district established in the town.
Are we allowed to ask questions, or do we ask questions at the end?
Pardon?
Are we allowed to ask questions?
This is the subject matter of the time, so this is the appropriate time if you want to ask a question.
Okay.
Please.
Should I do it now, or should I wait?
You can do
Oh,
it.
okay. Yeah, I'm Tom Watson from the Bridgehampton Civic Association. I was just curious, when you say this list of properties, so when we met, you sort of referred to a report. Is this the same thing? this list of properties and this
It would be
report?
the basis of the report eventually. The report would contain, a report would be presented for recommending a historic district.
Right.
The list of properties that are involved would be part,
So it's, so right now it's two separate things, so it's a list of
Right, yes.
properties that maybe will go into the report?
Right, yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
so this list of properties is gonna be given in February or to the supervisor?
Well, the list of properties will be discussed here and be part of our recommendation to the town board for what the historic district should contain.
Okay, but does this list of properties go to the supervisor or board, or you guys discuss it and then you put it in the report and then the report goes?
We decide on our recommendation, yes. It's our decision as to what to recommend.
Okay, and then it goes into the report, or,
And yes, it goes into the
Okay.
report that'll be presented to the town board.
and what's the time frame for the report?
Hopefully, I would hope maybe April, or May maybe, looking at just the kind of workload that's involved.
Okay. Because these are kind of things that the Civic Association is going to ask you, you know, I think, you know, in terms of, okay. So the timeline for this report is April, May,
Right.
okay. And then after that, then the announcements go out? To the
Well, there may
property
be
owners?
announcements before to the property owners. There's a notification process that has to take place. There's also an education process
Right.
that has to take place with owners that requires writing some material up as to what it means to be included in a historic district.
Okay.
And this is all not stuff that has been created before that we can boilerplate into a new life. We have
But-
to create this stuff ourselves.
But the announcement is, the main reason for the announcement is to tell the property owners, this is a coming, you know, is this just to give them a heads up?
That is what it's going to be, and they will also then have to, they'll be informed too, there'll be a public hearing before the town board on the project.
And but that's after the report goes in to them, is the town hearing comes after that, right?
The public hearing is after the report goes to the town board.
Okay,
Yeah.
so the announcement's just a heads up that all this is coming.
Right, that and to, you know, avoid confusion as much as possible
Right.
over something that's very novel.
Okay. Okay, I think I got it. Oh. Is there a pen? Thanks.
All right, thank you, Tom. All right. Cool. As another item, just the 14 Flying Point Road, are all aware that the town board did designate the structure as Town of Southampton landmark. They had some questions based upon seeing a house being moved, seeing a house under construction that had basically Tyvek on it, wrapped in Tyvek, and how could a landmark be wrapped in Tyvek? And so, but anyway, they resolved their ambiguities.
Ed, I watched you, you did an excellent job, with your, you know, you had the visuals and your aids to show different pictures and the points being made, so, you know, great job. And also, of course, there's a nice article in the Southampton Press as of last
Yeah.
week for,
Yeah.
Yes, they acquired some of the material beforehand as to, and then apparently watched by virtue of CTV's broadcast of it. So,
but you handled all the questions and explanations and everything, really did a great job.
well, thank you. That's, I suppose, after all these years, I should be able to do that.
Well, but it all went well.
Okay, we have outstanding the 76 Main Street West Hampton Beach application for the Performing Arts Center. I haven't drafted my letter yet, but if you wanted to inform the group that is applying, that basically we were going to recommend to the West Hampton Beach trustees that they develop their own code for historic preservation. So, and then, you know, I'll write a different kind of letter to the village trustees.
All right, no problem.
149 South Country Road,
Yes, finally.
back to our old neighborhood here.
This is a property that we reviewed back in late 2020, early 21, as a potential landmark. We recommended at that time, in January 2021, we made a recommendation to town board to designate this property as a landmark. What happened was, at the time we made that recommendation, the property was owned by a different owner. They were accomplishing some renovations of the property, which are now complete. The application that we reviewed at that time had detailed explanation of the changes that were going to take place, which we didn't have any problem with. After we made the recommendation, there was an approach to CPF, and there was an offer for an easement made, and it was made to the prior owner. What happened with this application is that the prior owner was going to place the easement on the property and take the easement money, and the new owner, who is in the process of purchasing the house, would have the easement but would not have any of the easement funds, which did not sit very well, and so the deal went south for a while until the landmarking and easement were dropped, and then the new owner made the purchase of the property. So, new owner happened to attend a walking tour I did for downtown Remsenburg, down our main street, and expressed interest in landmarking the house. And so we've been working back and forth, and the result was that he requested I assist him with submitting an updated application. So the materials that were circulated include a report that you previously saw a couple years ago, with updated information about the current condition of the house. Bill went and took some photos showing the current house with the changes that have been made to it. Those photos were, I think, in November of last year. And there have been no changes to that since that time. I met with the owner in December, and who he very graciously gave me a tour of the interior of the house, which is absolutely lovely. They have retained a lot of the historic fabric on the inside, including flooring materials. Windows are all original. 3 working fireplaces, a lot of interior woodwork and built-in cabinetry, etc., are still all original. It's an absolutely lovely home. And the current owner doesn't intend to do anything particular with it other than keep it the way it is. He may do an addition out the back at some point in the future, but the back is not particularly visible from public right-of-way. This process, he would like to proceed in the same way as we did the last process, whereby we make a recommendation to the town board to landmark the property and then hold the landmarking process at that point while he seeks an appraisal and an easement offer from CPF. If he receives an easement offer that is acceptable to him, it's in his intention to landmark and get the easement on parallel tracks. So, the house is an 1820 house. It has long associations with the Tuttle family, including perhaps the most well-known of its Tuttle inhabitants, and that was Willis Tuttle, who was a very well-known historian in our local area. He wrote many articles for the Long Island Forum. He wrote for the Brooklyn Daily Eagle. He wrote for quite a few papers in our area. And, you know, I remember I knew him, I knew his wife. I was still pretty young at the time, but he was definitely very well respected in the community. And the property other than the addition of the more recent construction of the garage and the addition of a pool, is essentially the same as when Willis and Jesse lived there. So, does anybody have any questions about the history of the property or the buildings? There are two historic buildings, which is the main house, and then there's a little shed out back which has a timber frame, and it looks to be also quite old, and that is at least somewhat visible from the street.
I got a couple questions.
Yeah.
One, what would be the name of this landmark?
That was an interesting question. When the previous application was submitted, the name proposed at that time was the Willis Tuttle House, after probably the most well-known former owner. But there were quite a few Tuttle family members who were associated with this. There was Austin Tuttle, and I think it actually goes back to his father, which was Joseph Tuttle. And so I would suggest that it be called the Tuttle House, and not necessarily associated with one Tuttle family member or another, unless this presents some problems.
The Tuttle Family House?
Mm-hmm. Could be the Tuttle family house.
How many Tuttle family houses would there be in that area? Would there be another one?
Well,
No, that was just,
yeah, I mean, potentially if we had other people in the
There are a
vicinity
zillion
who,
Tuttles.
yes, there are a zillion Tuttles, and not just in this community, but there are a number of other Tuttle houses up and down the street that potentially could be considered for landmarking.
okay, if this would be the Tuttle family house, then the other ones would be named a more specific name, maybe.
That would be one way to do
Well,
it.
If
is
you-
it,
First come, first served.
yeah, is it the Tuttle House or is it a Tuttle House?
It is a Tuttle house.
So are there more impressive older Tuttle houses?
Well,
if you
there
want?
are some more
That would be
impressive ones.
the Tuttle House.
I don't think there's necessarily any older ones.
I like the Tuttle family house, and then,
Could we give it a date? Sort of
Thinking,
call it the 1820 Tuttle House or something, whatever the date would be.
Yeah, I mean, it was 1820, it's been pretty much understood to have been its construction date. Call it the 1820 Tuttle family house.
Mhm.
I was thinking
That's long
too.
on a plaque.
Yeah, it is.
1820 Tuttle House. It's nice.
But it allows for more Tuttle houses,
Right.
because you could have
Yes.
the 1840 and the
Yeah.
1860 and.
Well, tentatively, will the Tuttle Family House work, and if something similar needs to be thought about, we can still have time to do that in terms of
Yes.
picking that, and if maybe it's the person, the Tuttle that built it, you know, that might be
That might be.
a distinguishable thing for somebody.
Yeah,
I kinda like that.
right. Although there probably are more than a few Joseph Tuttles
Yes.
lurking out there. But
Okay,
yes,
well,
that
we'll
would be
still
what we.
work on it, but there'll be something along that line, yeah.
Yes, I mean, I don't know how many other Willis Tuttles there would be, and he was very well known, so.
Willis Tuttle is a nice name.
One of the other things here, this excerpt is from 1858 map,
Is it 1858?
Chase map.
50.
Yes.
53.
The John
53.
Chase map is 1858. yeah.
Ah, okay. Okay, I can repair that. Yes, that was the Chase map.
Okay, yes,
It's nice.
now, the program forward needs to have a report to recommend its
Yes.
designation, which would be something that would be reformatted rather than this report, which talks about our prior involvement and, the ownership. The question is isolating the historical significance of it and kind of removing the review process that was involved here. And I think title it Landmark Qualification Report to give it some significance when it goes to the town board.
And it would, I assume, go with a similar letter to what we prepared last time. with the
Pretty much the letter
recommendation.
was, I thought, okay, I had, change the dates on it.
Yeah,
I think, I also remove item F from the
Right.
letter.
yes, that would,
Okay,
that would get scrapped. Yep.
okay. All right, if we're satisfied with that progress, okay.
All right, so I will make those changes and prepare a draft letter, and we'll consider it, I assume, at our next meeting? Or do you want to,
Well, maybe just pass it under the eyes,
I'll pass it across the table.
okay, before it's sent off or something. and
Yes.
just,
Will do. I'll circulate for review and approval.
Okay, a few other things here. We talked about GIS access, and we'll take care of that. Certified local government business. Vicky has been nominated or otherwise assigned. The idea of being liaison to SHPO and what they have to offer through the Certified Local Government Program, and that's fine with everybody, so we can,
Thank you all.
you're anointed with that authority, so.
Can I ask a question about the certified local government?
Yes, you can.
I just want to, quickly, is that totally separate from the Bridgehampton Historic District effort? They're not tied together in any way? It's not like waiting for the certified, are they totally separate?
Totally separate.
Okay,
Right.
thank you.
Okay, so that is done. And Susan, you forwarded a summary list of,
The demos, I've got only 5 more to add to the construction, so that is, luckily, we didn't have a lot in November, December. I'll get that one,
night.
finished.
Can I,
Need to work on the referral, and then I'll get the summary out, so, with the holidays and being gone, and then writing a report. This fell to my last project, but I'll finish that up, not a problem, so they're in progress. Hopefully you'll have them within the next week. And when you get them, just look at them at your leisure. Stephanie gave me some updates, for status, that's fine. I can change them at any time. But, once I get all that information, I'll have the summary out so we can look at that before the next meeting.
anyway, thanks for all the data work that you do.
I keep wondering if there's some way to computer generate that, but I haven't, through the system, but we'll think about that in the future. Because actually, I include more information than we need, and I did it for a number of years. I thought maybe having the architect and a lot of different but I see nothing comes up as making that important. I used to try to keep track of how many days it took us to review it, but that started maybe 8 years ago because the building department, we only had the 45 days, and of course now we're always on track, way ahead of that. So there's a lot of information that is not really pertinent. So actually, there might be a quicker way to, if we could get GIS or just to generate that with the, but they would need the objection and the not objection. And the other thing with that is now that they're available on the portal, because I would always do a little summary, because a lot of people wouldn't have access to their printed reports, but with the portal and with the fact that it's listed in GIS, that you'll be going over, the reports are there and the application. If there was any question, people should be able to retrieve that. Whereas before, there was no retrieval. I mean, once it was gone, it was pretty much, unless you had it on your computer, you didn't. But I'll think about that. So with less information, more concise, but still it's nice to have a list because it's easier to tally up. Would you like me to move on to the next one quickly, the ZBA? Okay.
Go on.
Actually, their agendas were pretty, they were small, short ones. There was a public hearing on the 11th, there was no concern for that. On the 12th, I just point out there was 143 South Country, and there's an AYB of 1840, even though the picture doesn't appear to be an 1840 house, but there's a 2-lot subdivision. So I'm not sure if you want me to request that. I don't know what the status of the house is. There's no indication that I saw that it would be demolished. Would you like me to?
Yes.
Okay.
Please.
So I'll get 143. So that's a planning board. That one's easy to, but that was on the 12th. And also on the 12th, there were new solar panel regulations being discussed. Is there anything we need to be aware of with that?
I'm not familiar with that.
Okay, it's just that sometimes it affects us, but I guess we'll find out in the future if it does. On the 12th, for a public hearing for a pre-submission, there were turf barns at the Atlantic Golf Course, which is an addition, and I'm not sure what building is being added onto, if it's the old potato barn or a different one. And there's also turf barns at National, but it's a new building, so that would have less effect on being the large property it is. Did you want me to get more information about that, or want to wait and see about the turf barn on the Atlantic Golf Course?
Well, let me
Okay,
look at it. You said it was part of the schedule that you saw.
it was pre-submission on January 12th, the planning
Oh,
board.
yeah, well, I don't do
Okay.
it every day, but.
Okay, so if you want me to do that in the future, let me know, and
Okay.
I can request that. ZBA was mostly repeats and no concern. However, on the 19th, it mentioned 930 head of the pond and water mill, like a certain gym building being built, but then it also mentions a new house. And I forgot to write the AYB, I think it's 1740 on this one. However, we've never reviewed it. It's not an AKRF because it's screened. And through the years, in the last 5 or 10 years, I've seen work being done there, even though we didn't review it. But I'm just gonna request from the ZBA secretary if she could give me the map. Because if it's gonna be demolished, we might wanna know a little bit more about it, if it indeed there is a 1740 section left. So I'll request that. That's all I have.
Thanks.
Okay. Landmark maintenance grants. We had a news release for it. I do not know of any applications come in. The article that appeared in the Southampton Press, or the announcement in the Southampton Press, was folded into another article that probably didn't attract any prominence for anybody, but so far we have no applications, so we'll sit on that and see what happens. We did I did get an inquiry. I'm supposed to, in theory, have a meeting with North Sea Community House Association, which is looking for basically maintenance support for the schoolhouse that they own in North Sea, and which is a landmark. And they approached the town, and I got an email from Cindy McNamara asking to come to a meeting in order to find out what might be available. So, but the idea that jumped out of the box right away was a easement, facade easement for the schoolhouse, which I think is the route to go for them, but that's related indirectly to the maintenance of buildings issue of landmarks that both is an issue for CPF and an issue for us in general, so just to make you aware of that. We did certify local government, and do we have anything else to bring up or report on or be aware of? So, is there anything from your end, David? Nothing? Okay. Other than periodically we keep getting some irritations with the online digital submission system that raises questions, but we just have to kind of live with it. I think some other boards are not going to be as easily happy with it as we are. So we'll see how that continues to work out down the road. I think we have to revise the forms that were created, not by us, not by me. I never saw what was behind them, but you go to the portal for Southampton Town to submit an application, and all this stuff pops up, and the question is, does it really bring the right kind of material and focus for the applicant to provide us with the information that's needed? So that's still to be worked on down the road. So, but other than that, I don't have anything else to
Impressive.
say, and hearing no other business, the meeting is adjourned.
Well done.
Hey.
Hey.